I said, Carmel, pray for me. I'm going to go talk to Norman. She's getting used to that kind of action, and she prayed, and I went over there, and I sat down, and real quick, and I said, hi, Norman, you remember who I am? He said, you remember who I am? I said, Norman, listen, I'm your neighbor. He said, I'm your neighbor. And he looked at me out of those eyes, out of those thick glasses, and I said, Norman, do you know who Jesus is? He said, do you know who Jesus is? I said, because people were beginning to look, I said, Norman, did you ever think about asking Jesus to come into your heart and your life? He never repeated me. For the first time, he said, I've given it serious consideration. I was shocked. A couple nights later, the Lord said, 700 Club's going to have an extra special good program on tonight. Invite Norman. Hey, Norman! Hey, Norman, you all come over tonight, watch television. 700 Club got a big come on. Well, the Lord wanted to witness to him. He said, okay. He dressed up for us that night. He didn't take a bath. He didn't put on different clothes. He put on an old string tie that somebody had given him. Hung about like that, and here he come across the street that night. And he come up the steps, and he came in the house. And the Lord said, get him there where he can see, because he's got those glasses, and I want to witness to him. And I said, Norman, come on in. We're really glad to have you tonight at our house. Lied. I said, sit down over here in my chair. He sat down in my chair, and he watched 700 Club. He was witness to. My wife sat back here, and I sat back here, and we watched him watch 700 Club. And after a while, he got up and said, thank you very much. And he started out the door, and I went over and turned the light on for him. I said, watch the steps now. Good night, Norman. Good night now. Come back. And good night. Closed the door. I ran in the house, ran over to my chair. I looked at my chair. There wasn't a spot on it. It was like no one had ever sat there. It was clean. My wife sprayed a little bit of stuff in the air, and the house smelled real good, and we couldn't even tell he'd been there. A few days later, the Lord said, take him somewhere with you. I said, hey, Norman, you ever go to the St. Louis baseball game? Busch Stadium, St. Louis? No. Like to. I said, we'll go. Picked him up just a few days later. It was hot weather by this time. He come out with one of the longest wool tweedy looking winter coats on you've ever laid eyes on. It touched him about his shoes, and he's big, tall. He looked like the Gray Ghost when he come out of the house. I said, Norman, you're not going to need that coat. It's hot, you know. We're going to be outdoors. There's no, and it's the sun just, and you leave. And he said, I want to wear my. I said, Norman, you know, get in the car, Norman. Turned the air conditioner wide open, headed up the interstate to St. Louis. He kept looking at that CB radio. Finally, I said, talk on that thing. Here, push that button and talk. I said, hey, man, Breaker, we got a fella here never had a CB, never been around one before. He mows lawns around our town for a living, and he cleans ashes out of the furnaces in the wintertime. I said, let's give him a name, give him a nickname. Somebody said, well, he'd be the old grass cutter. And he just, and I said, here, old grass cutter, talk to him. He said, hello? It's the old grass cutter. And he was fascinated. He got to St. Louis at the ball game. We parked in the parking area. And when we got out of the car, I figured out a plan. I said, Norman, I'm not going in the ball game with you if you wear that stupid old coat. And when he took it off, I saw why he was wearing it. He had on 2 pair of dress pants that were split, both of them, all the way up the back. I said, put your coat back on, Norman. We went in the ball game. We turned that turnstile and walked in. And the first guy we saw was a little old guy with a T-top on. He had a shorts on right here. He didn't have a muscle on his body, but he thought he did. He had hair that stood out like a Brillo pad. He had a transistor radio great big under this arm. He had a big cup of something to drink in this arm, and he was bebopping in the ball game. He looked at Norman, never batted an eye. Looked at me a little strange. We got in. Norman didn't watch the game at all. He watched the crowd. 30,000 people. He said, could I have a hot dog? I gave him a hot dog and then another one and then 10 more, and I gave him soda and peanuts. I never seen a machine eat like that. He just ate and ate and ate. And the seventh inning got there, and I forgot it was the seventh inning. Everybody in the place stood up to stretch, and I said, "Oh, yeah, Norman." But this time I had told him, because it was hot, he was perspiring. I said, "Just take your coat down and drape it over the seat." Sometime back around the third inning or so, and he draped it over the seat, and he was much more comfortable. But now it was the seventh inning, and we were standing all over the park, and I said, "Stand up, Norman, let's stretch." And we were just stretching away. And all of a sudden, I happened to glance behind me. The guy behind me was going. I said, "Sit down, Norman, sit down, sit down." It'd been a busy year, busy year. I've been working at the coal mine, and I was tired, and I've been singing in churches on the weekend, and I was telling the Lord about it, because my vacation was coming up. And you know what the Lord told me? He said, "Why don't you take Norman with you on vacation?" I said, "I'm going to Opryland, Lord." Norman at Opryland and he said, I said, "Lord, I'm not going to do it now. Sir, I'm tired." And a couple of weeks later, we was going down the highway to Opryland. Norman sitting beside me, my wife and kids in the back. I noticed something about him. He was beginning to be relaxed around people. He was beginning to be less nervous, and he didn't talk to himself as much as he had before. We got to Opryland, and I didn't put him on the Wabash Cannonball, because he's about 62 years old at the time, and I was afraid he might have a heart problem over that, So I tried to pick out a ride he could handle, and I found the bumper cars. We got him in there, and he sat down in that big old bumper car, and he got everybody in the place called over to one side. They turned that right on. He had the whole crowd pinned, and he had his car sideways, and they had them jammed in over there, and they were mad. And he was looking around going, and looking at me going, and he couldn't figure it out. We began to laugh, and we were standing outside that place. Tears began to run in. I said, "Look, Carmen, look at old Norman. He's got them, everyone caught over there," and the kids were going, "Oh." And finally, somebody got loose. And the ride was about half over, and they felt like they'd been cheated, and they were in a hurry. They came all the way around that rink, and they wanted to hit somebody before that ride was over. And there sat Norman, and they hit him full speed ahead. He went, "Oh." And then he really tried to get that thing going. And here comes someone else, and they were starting to get loose now in great numbers. And one by one, they'd come around, and they'd hit Norman. And the Spirit of the Lord spoke to me at Opryland. And he said, "That's what they've been doing to Norman. All his life, people been hitting on him. They've been hitting on him. When they throw snowballs at him, like he's not a human being, they hit on him. When they bring him old junky clothes they wouldn't wear anymore themselves, they hit on him." And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, "That's what my children do, my children, to one another."